My character was introduced as a janitor who went to a clean deep 13. I don't remember what for, but was then when Joel escaped from space. Lucky for them, there just happened to be another guy for the first time ever standing there, and so he was quickly shot up into space, and that was me.
There was a simplicity to it in the sense that, oh, this guy that we work with every day, now he's the star of the show.
Because I've been so close to the production, you know, and the ones with Joel where you see him on stage, you know, if you could widen that screen, you'd see me standing, you know, right outside of it, script in hand, and so to make that move over there to me was not that big of a deal, and I had, you know, I had been a performer and everything, so it was not, I didn't view it as that big of a change, and I felt like the characters I knew so well, so it didn't seem like much of a change until I started seeing the letters from the fans, and then I realized it was a big change.
Oh my God, Joel versus Mike, and to me it's very much like, you know, Mac versus PC.
Oh, some were just like intensely personal, you know, trying to destroy my soul, and others were just, you know, short and to the point. New guy blows, you know.
Mike's relationship with the robots was different than Joel's.
You know, Joel is a parent. I mean, he supposedly made the robots, and so it was a little bit of a father and his two little sons feeling to that.
I always thought that Mike was more like a compatriot with them. Although, you know, since they were already there, they could kind of, you know, give him a hard time.
That was like I was the butt of the other guys, the robots' jokes, and they would torment me, and that was something I really enjoyed playing up as it went along.
Hello there. Welcome to the SOL, the satellite of laughs, as we like to call it.
We've tied up Mike and jammed an oily rag into his mouth so that we may bring you the following joke.
It was a little bit hard for us, I think, to figure out exactly what you do with that. It wasn't as it was just a different kind of thing.
Well, right away, Joel had this thing that he, you know, brought in from a stand-up act with a lot of gadgetry and this invention exchange thing. It was kind of his, you know, he had done a lot of prop stuff, so we incorporated that into the show in the early days. And when I came on, it was like we did it for a little while, but it's like, I'm not a prop comedian, let's turn that into a strength instead. So that was the biggest thing. And he had a little bit of, you know, he had his style is a little more laconic and a little funkier, and mine is not, you know, so we had to find that gradually as it went along. We kind of always had a notion that we were about to be fired. I mean, that's the nature of being a comedian, and most of the jokes in the writing room were, you know, about, in our free time was, right now, just think they're up there in their room writing up the papers to have us fired, and you know, occasionally, twice, it turned out to be true.
Around the end of season 5 into 6, it became pretty clear that Comedy Central was beginning to emerge its own identity, and I believe Mystery Science was inconsistent with that identity.
They were looking to do a new direction with their programming, and one of the last seasons we were there was one of the first seasons that South Park was starting to take off.
They found that, and that was, you know, that was their eureka moment. And a Cowtown puppet show didn't really fit into their idea of what their network should be. So the handwriting was on the wall that we were coming near the end of the run there.
Then we started looking towards making a movie, Mystery Science Theater, the movie. I think we thought that was the next place to go. I think one of the things that made it seem possible, we had done a live show in front of a live audience, and part of it was seeing that reaction.
We had maybe 800 people in a room watching a movie with our performers real time.
Here's a world without end is about to begin.
And when you make a TV show, you don't get any feedback whatsoever. It's when it comes out and it's in people's homes, so you never know what they think. You don't get to hear them laughing. We did a live show, and suddenly we hear this whole theater just erupting in laughter for what we're doing.
What? Is this hard or something? I memorized this in a second. Okay, here, I'll walk you through.
And so it was really as simple as, well, where could we do this where there's a room full of people that could watch it? And obviously, a motion picture theater was a place to do that.
Shooting the film was one of the best times of my life. Going through the business of it was one of the worst times of my life.
We had a staff at that time of about 17 or 18 people. If we were to do it independently, we wouldn't have the kind of money and budgets to keep that staff together. We'd have to let people go, including we probably would have had to let some writers go, and we didn't want to do that. By going to a studio, we were able to look at somebody else's money. We could keep our staff together.
You lose a lot of freedoms. You know, the television show, we could say a lot of things and reference a lot of things that we could no longer reference with the motion picture.
That process of running your jokes through 300 tons of lawyers it's really enervating and very, very frustrating.
In the end, it was a very difficult process, and this was strange for us because we had made something like, I don't know, maybe 90 or 100 shows by that point. We knew who we were, we knew who the show, who the characters were, but we'd get notes like, okay, so what's the least favorite character in Mystery Science? And we're looking around at each other going, well, there's 5 characters and we love them all, and they all, we know the physics of how they all come together, so I don't know, Dr. Forrester, because he's sort of evil. And then, okay, well, which is the most favorite character? And this is sort of like this template that was put on this show, it just didn't fit at all.
It seemed like they were trying to thwart us every step of the way into having this thing become a success, but I can speak from a position of age and experience and bitterness now about these things.
They said, well, you can use any movie that you can get rights to, but we'd prefer that you use our vault because it was easier.
The simple criteria was, what's a good-looking movie that sort of has that Mystery Science feeling to it, and it was one of their old, This Island Earth, which was kind of respected, I guess. We found out only after the fact. I mean, I knew it was sort of, classic sci-fi, but what does that mean? This is a cheesy movie. So that was the #1 question we got when it came out from press guys. Were slightly aggressive, like, why'd you pick a good movie? Have you seen it lately? I mean, you were 5 when you saw it. Come on.
Sometimes I think we would have been better just to release Manos in the Hands of Fate as our feature and just see what happened. It would have been a lot simpler.
The movie did poorly in the box office because it was only opened up in 35 theaters, which is, they were calling it a rollout. They were going to do a regional rollout, which means we don't want to open your film.
But they were pushing a Pamela Anderson pick called Barbed Wire,
which I believe opened up in 2,500 theaters or something like that.
They decided to shift the promotional dollars into that opus and put Mystery Science on the shelf.
The fans seemed to like it, the critics seemed to like it, and it was a wild experience.
I still meet people who say that the movie is their favorite thing, so it has its fans.
And it was odd that the movie was released right about the time that the announcement of our cancellation was happening.
At that time, we were, really ascending in our popularity. So it was really a question of, well, what would be a good home? And I think at the time, I only made one phone call, which was obviously over to Sci-Fi.
It took a while, I remember, to persuade the Sci-Fi channel that they could actually have a show that made light of sci-fi. But I think they were interested from the start, and then that period was just their internal conversations about trying to convince everyone it'll be okay, we'll survive it. But there was, even after we were at the network, at Sci-Fi Network, there was still some talk about, I don't know if this is appropriate to have this sci-fi movie being made fun of, and also, was there enough of a sci-fi element in Mystery Science? I mean, if we're doing a movie that's not sci-fi, how is the show sci-fi other than that we're in space?
Because they were a Sci-Fi channel, they insisted that the movies we do were sci-fi based, which was fine by us. There's fortunately a wealth of really terrible sci-fi based movies.
Dustbuster Galactica.
Maybe this is an anthology of short, plotless movies.
One of the things that really became a problem with the latter era sci-fi movies from the 80s, say, was that credit sequences started becoming incredibly long in the 1980s. It didn't matter how crappy your movie was. You had an 11-minute credit sequence, and you have to show the credit sequence. You can't not show the credit sequence. And so we almost had to start coming up with extended sketches just to cover the credit sequence.
Mike, why are you growling?
It's a giant dinosaur, see?
I don't get you, Mike.
It's forced perspective. By being over here, I can make this toy dinosaur look huge, see?
Where? Oh, hell, there you are. What are you doing with my toy?
I'm demonstrating forced perspective.
Oh, how nice for you.
Oh, don't be so sardonic. It's neat. Look, you can bite your
Okay,
head.
Mike, let's humor you. It is neat.
When Joel left, it put the bug in my head. You know, it's like, yeah, you know, maybe at some point you got to do something else. And then Mike coming in went, well, this could, you know, make it more interesting and keep me going for a while. And then it was time to go.
Trace left after season 7, and Bill Corbett started as Crow in season 8.
Yeah, I was hired initially just as a writer, first for season 6 of Comedy Central, just the last couple of shows of that, Frank Conniff's last shows. And then in the Sci-Fi era, I was hired as a writer. They didn't quite know what to do about Trace leaving and about Crow. Like, were they gonna replace him with another robot? Were they, you know, it was a big question, and I think they just didn't want to face it for a while. And finally, they had me and a whole bunch of other people on staff and off audition for the part. And I gave I think what was a pretty sad audition as a puppeteer.
Oh my God, this puppet is just, you know, rod still there.
There was no correlation between Crow's mouth moving and what I was saying at the time. And for the first couple of shows, that was, it didn't get all that much better. But I think I had the right voice or attitude or something, or they were just desperate. But whatever it is, it worked out.
He learned quickly and added, I think, you know, an acerbic wit to it that we really played off of and really loved, because it's part of Bill's personality. He's got a little, you know, aggressive East Coast kind of get in your face kind of stuff. So we played off that well. Well, you know, things get pretty tense between us, and what with one thing or another, I mean, you could easily have killed us.
And you didn't do that. So thanks.
Well, taking over from Trace was daunting because as a fan of the show, he was the one I was most in awe of. No offense to anybody else, because they're all awesome, but between Dr. Forrester and Crow, I just thought, wow, what talent. And I loved Crow, and I didn't want to mess up Crow. So I think I led off with a little bit of an imitation of Trace's voice, and little by little, Mike Nelson and Kevin Murphy said, you don't have to do that quite so much. You know, let yourself be it a little bit more. And that was a bit of a relief, because I was already struggling with the kind of complicated puppet thing, and trying to be someone else was hard. But really what makes Crow and any of those guys work is really good and funny writing. So as much as I'd love to say that I, you know, revived Crow, I think the writing was kind of a nice touchstone for that anyway, you know.
He's boxed in.
Yeah, well, I'm cardboard.
Shut up, you two.
The fans, the real super fans, had already gone through a couple of wrenching changes. I mean, notably the switch from Joel to Mike. And I think that remained the big issue for most of them. So they were a little inured to big changes, I think, by then. Servo, it changed pretty early on, and I think Kevin was pretty firmly thought of as Tom. But even when that happened, Kevin got a big banner that said, like a huge across-the-wall banner that said, "I hate Tom Servo's new voice." So some fan, knowing that, kind of cheekily sent me the same thing, and I appreciate it. I thought, yes, trial by fire. But I tell you, I was really lucky, I think, because I think people were tired of kind of grousing about changes in the show and appreciated it for what it was. They gave me an enormous learning curve, I think, and I used it. And fans were great. Fans were really kind to me.
I became the evil nemesis.
Hey!
Hey, you tried to kill us!
What the?
No! I didn't! No! Never!
Yes, you did.
It was a big deal because Trace's shoes, Dr. Forster's shoes, were very hard to fill. And I was a nervous wreck, but I also felt like I had this great opportunity to be Mrs. Forrester. And I remember it was kind of when forums and chat rooms were really coming to bear on the internet, and there was a lot of discussion. And I was already afraid of this newfangled internet, and there was a lot of discussion on the boards about whether or not I was suitable. There were a lot of personal remarks. It was really devastating at first. And then I realized, you know what, I have the greatest job in the world. I am really lucky. I'm not going to let that interfere with anything.
We are in deep trouble!
We get Mike in women's clothing quite often.
You know, he's a nice-looking guy, but he is an ugly woman. Ugly, ugly woman.
You could get the best makeup artist in the world. You could have Rick Baker and his entire team work on me with latex for 20 hours in the chair, and I would be the ugliest hag you've ever seen in your life. And so I think that was the point, was there is no way to make this guy look anything but just hideous. And I guess that was the gag.
Yeah, we believed in ritually humiliating Mike whenever possible.
Like with Joel, Joel didn't like to wear hats, which is the wrong thing to tell a group of writers. So I think we just put him in hats after that. You know, as many hats as we could think of, for no reason. Let's write a sketch where he's got a hat. So with Mike, I think it was probably a little bit of the same thing, where others of us were aching to wear women's clothing, and it bothered him more.
Hey, Susie, what's the matter?
Yes, Susie, what's wrong?
Oh, nothing, I guess.
Come on, Susie, you can tell us.
Yeah.
Gee, I don't know, girls. Well, okay, it's like this.
Uh-huh.
You know Steve?
Uh-huh.
Steve's a werewolf, but he's my guy. He's different from the rest, I don't know why. But my mother and pop, they disapprove. But no one can stop us, for it's true, Lou.
Huh?
Well, I had to rhyme two words.
Okay, sure, come on, got it, go ahead.
I tell you, I think of anything I did on the show, I loved the songs the most. And I wish we could have done more, but they were always really time-consuming when the schedule was tight, because, you know, if they were going to be any good, they had to be written, and Mike had to actually work out the music, Mike or Kevin. I did a little bit of the music, but I would always have to eventually punt it off to one of those two guys. So, and they were producing and directing a lot of the time, and it was hard, but boy, did I love the songs.
I held his paw and I touched his cold nose.
That means he's healthy.
But just then his hairy paws caused the wheel to slide. I screamed, too late, we hit a tree, he died.
Gee, that's too bad, Susie.
Yeah, the songs were a conscious thing. I think everyone had dabbled in music, and I had a little, I had a synthesizer set up and everything, and could knock these things out. And Kevin also is a good musician, so we often teamed on that. But everybody, I think, at some point wrote a song, and then I would just sort of throw them together on this little setup. And it's pretty funny when actual musicians come up to me and say, yeah, you're an actual musician, you got some talent. It's like, no, you don't know. I don't have any talent. I mean, it's always just sort of aping some style, and it ended up being, you know, always sounding like, you know, you're at a pizza parlor or something with a ragtime piano. That, especially Kevin. Kevin wrote the same song like 400 times, but it was a good song. So.
Oh, there are so many people who were not on camera and who don't sit in the spotlight, who had, I think, just tremendous impact on the show and of our ability to do it well, and just became part of our family. Jeff Maynard, who was our prop master for a long time, who we called Tool Master Jeff Maynard, after the Violent Femme song Tool Master of Brainerd. He was a prop man, and he was an artist, I mean an actual painter artist, and he brought a lot of life into the props and the other sets that we would build. Patrick Bransick, who was another artist, who also built a lot of our sets, and also ended up doing Gypsy for a while. The thing that I loved about our prop department, Patrick and Jeff and Bees McKeever, was we could tell them to build the most ridiculous thing. We'd write our scripts on Monday. We had to have this done by Friday. So if we told them that we needed, 6 gorilla suits, homemade, because we couldn't afford to rent them. Okay, no problem. They'd find a way to put them together. Oh, and we need them to be in, leather battle panties or something, and they'd come up with leather battle panties. Jeff Stonehouse came on board, and suddenly the quality of the lighting and the photography just got to be fantastic, because he's a real artist with a camera. Another fellow, an unsung hero of Mystery Science Theater, Brad Keeley, who was our editor for many years of the show. Nothing would faze the guy, and he had a real knack for cutting the show. And whenever we do very few edits, but when we did them, they were important. And he'd do all of our compilation reels, and he'd do our specials and things like that. And he just added, from his end, a real life to what it was we did on the show.
No wonder I've suddenly become aware that I can leave my corporeal body and become pure energy, or pure thought, or reason, or pure any number of things. Here, let's see.
Wow, cool. Let's do it, Mike. One of our friends who did sound for us quite often, Tom Naunis, sort of he's a Buddhist man. He was sort of, I thought of him as sort of like the show's guru at certain times. Our still photographer, Michael Kienitz, is a war photographer with a huge pedigree and a complete anarchist from back in the 60s at the University of Wisconsin. Mickey is one of the funniest people I've ever met. He's this little blonde imp who's German but owns a house in Ireland. And he's a little insane. And I think one of the strings that goes through all these people who work with us is that they're all mildly insane. I think that's part of what makes it work.
Misties are basically just fans of the show.
Who know the names of the movies, who know the difference between Joel and Mike, who know that it's not Tim Servo, it's Tom Servo, things like that. That's a Misty.
The fans of Mystery Science are clearly B+ and higher fans. They're smart. They are very literate.
Like doctors and lawyers. An astronaut sent us a piece of fan mail.
In general, when you meet them, they're just really nice people and very respectful, and they just want to tell you how much they like the show.
We've had, orchestra conductors who, at that time, were writing out all their orchestrations late at night and using us as kind of background, and then really getting into the show. We met a lot of people that, scientists, and we went through JPL and went through Fermilab and all these places where we met all these real life mad scientists.
For the most part, they were just kind of excited that other people were writing a thing that they thought was funny, and it's happening somewhere in the Midwest, so it's just fun. So I think that they were just enthusiastic, as we were when it all started. It was just, we'd found each other.
We're getting fan mail from like Micronesia. It's like, I looked it up and said, well, there's 1 in 70 televisions in Micronesia. It's like, what are they, gathering the whole village? It turned out it was a high school teacher who had lived in the States and was getting the show sent to him over there. So, once we started getting feedback from the fans and then meeting them at conventions and going, wow, people really like this show.
I started getting fan mail, and people would tell me really personal details of their lives, like, I'm going through a horrible divorce, or my father is really sick and your show makes me laugh. It's the one thing I look forward to. And it suddenly occurred to me that, at the risk of sounding like a complete ninny, it occurred to me that I wasn't just going to a job every day, that what I did was actually beamed out to people, and people were watching it. And I still have trouble making that connection when I do an autograph line, or I still get emails and fan mail from people saying how much the show has meant to them. I still don't quite get that. I mean, it's wonderful, but it's a really interesting position to be in.
We got to meet quite a few of the fans because we did a couple of conventions in Minneapolis.
And they were spectacularly well attended. I mean, much more than I think we ever thought they would be.
Somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people twice flew to Minneapolis.
They were a phenomenal success. We did a live show in conjunction with them, and the fans just poured out for it. Poured out of their basements and into the convention, or they flocked. They flocked, they poured, they sweated, they drooled.
One of the great things about this convention was that it was actually put on by Best Brains itself. So the cast were completely accessible during the entire convention.
Going to those, the first one, and seeing people dressed up as the characters, and meeting people who could recite the facts of the show back to me that I had lost track of, meeting people who could correct me about certain aspects of the show. And when you see a man dressed as Pearl Forrester, that's when you really start to go into this mental war of what's happening. So I think that was a very wild experience. And they were intense and well-versed.
It was so much fun. There, people were just making friends right and left. Everyone just saying, beginning to talk about the show was so easy. We all had that in common.
It turned out, we were doing stuff that people really sort of latched onto and enjoyed, and it gives you this sort of sense of, ooh, this is, maybe what we're doing is more influential than we ever thought it was.
Mystery Science was more of a find, and there was something that was very, I think, joyful and soul-satisfying for a fan of the show to say, wow, this is neat. No one in my circle knows about it. I'll share it with them. Mystery Science evolved alongside the World Wide Web, and they were very quick to harness it to promote the show.
There was a lot of misinformation about MST3K in the early days. People were just making stuff up, and posting it. By this time, Joel had left the show, and people were posting all the time, I heard Joel's coming back, So we decided that we wanted to dispel these rumors and have a place where people could come and get real information that they could rely on and know was accurate. And that's when we started the first site called Misty News, which was the forerunner of satellite news. And Chris did a really smart thing, I think, was that before we went live, he contacted Julie Walker, who was the Info Club Cuba at the time, in charge of the Info Club, and asked her, could you come look at our site and see if anything we posted is incorrect or in error, and let us know. And she did, and it took off from there.
After they went from Comedy Central to Sci-Fi Channel, they decided that they had a newsletter that they were sending out to people, and the mailing costs just got too high. They were sending a little newsletter called Satellite News. And they contacted us at that time and said, would you like to take over, have a website where we could give you news like they did on Satellite News, and just take over and have a website for us? And we said, sure.
I think one of the joys of the production was what came in the mail. Sometimes it was 15 hand-knit Icelandic wool sweaters, one for each of us, about 2-3 inches thick. And sometimes it was a small bag full of toenails. So there was a range of what was sent in. One of the amazing things was cookies would be sent in, and we would eat them without even thinking about who sent this and what were the kitchen conditions and where these were made. So we've always had a pretty organic and fun relationship with the fans, and they've been a big part of what we've succeeded with.
For me, it was this kind of profound thing last summer where these adults were coming up to me who were in the business saying, oh, I got to tell you, Mystery Science Theater really inspired me to get into the business, because there's this invitation in it, like I saw. You guys were just making it up. That's what I'm going to do. So
the fans have almost always been the fourth person in the theater. They've carried the show.
One of the first things I did after I watched it was wrote into the show. I never do that. I never write to TV shows. And I actually wrote to them, and they sent it back some information. They were very responsive. They sent back a membership card to a fan club, and they did all this stuff. And at that time I was a freelance writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I pitched an idea to an editor to do the story about the show. And they said, okay, go ahead and do it. And I interviewed Joel and Jim, and they did a piece in 1991, in August of 1991. And as it turned out, that was just the period where they were waiting to get renewed for their second season. And the piece that I wrote in Philadelphia got noticed by the people at TV Guide, whose headquarters are in suburban Philadelphia. And they did a little piece about Mystery Science Theater, and Time Magazine saw that, and they did a little piece about Mystery Science Theater, and Newsweek saw that, so of course they had to do a piece. It was a whole media round that happened, And that whole media round, Jim Mallon later told me, was responsible for saving Mystery Science Theater because because of the positive publicity, they renewed the show.
They were there all the way through, and at every turn, they were very, very passionate.
When I meet people, I never assume that they know about Mystery Science Theater. I'd say it's about, I don't know, 1 in 4 people, generally. It's always just enough to make my day, you know, when people go, oh yeah.
When I was a kid, it was a ritual to get up very early on Saturday morning and watch television in my pajamas. And when Mystery Science Theater became a pajama show, that sort of was, to me, sort of a capstone on that, to know that something I had contributed to and worked on had become that much ingrained into the culture.
Clearly, it's a show, a handmade show that's a labor of love from start to finish.
Good chemistry is rare, and it was really fun to love every second of your job, you know.
I'm really proud of the time I spent there.
It's so weird. It's like it's coming from someplace you don't know. You know, it just pops out of the country somewhere. And I think that's what made it so unique. It really was coming out of the middle of the country.
I got to make really funny, smart people who I respected, make them laugh.
How did I luck out? Who gets to watch TV and sit around for a living?
I'm proud that I acted when I did, that I had an idea and I kind of had the resources to kind of get it to the point where I could fulfill my part of Mystery Science Theater.
What are we going to do today? Well, we're going to watch TV and make each other laugh. Oh, and the hard part?
We were laughing our butts off, and you know, you can't ask for more than that.
If you're wondering how he eats and breathes and other science facts, just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. Go Mystery Science Theater 3000. Girl.